I think we're now going to turn to our second class for today, Antimicrobials, and this is very timely because 2 days ago, a number of distinguished scientists who study antimicrobials released the Florence statement on triclosan and triclocarban, which were the two most commonly used antimicrobials. Maybe they still are. And this is a scientific consensus of more than 200 scientists that these chemicals in many health do not provide health benefits usually, and that they can cause serious harm. So we can, and you might want to check out Florence statement if you want to learn more. But for now, let's watch the video.
Welcome. I'd like to tell you about antimicrobials and ask, are they helping us or are they harming us? Antimicrobials are a class of chemicals that are supposed to kill microorganisms or inhibit their growth. They are one of the 6 classes or families that contain many of the chemicals of concern found in consumer products and building materials. Antimicrobials might sound like a good idea, but they're often unnecessary and can do more harm than good. They can hurt beneficial organisms and other living things. Nonetheless, antimicrobials are added to thousands of products, including personal care products, hand soaps, paints, exercise mats, flooring, apparel, food storage containers, home textiles, keypads and keyboards, kitchenware, school supplies, and countertops. 2 antimicrobials of concern are triclosan and triclocarban. For years, triclosan was used in liquid soaps and triclocarban in bar soaps. But these antimicrobials provide no benefit over plain soap and water. Triclosan can disrupt hormone functioning and may cause adverse reproductive and developmental effects. Other health concerns are increases in allergen sensitivity and antibiotic resistance. Antimicrobials can end up in places where they don't belong, like water, food, and nearly all breast milk samples tested. Triclosan and triclocarban are toxic to algae, crustaceans, and fish. They are not completely removed by wastewater treatment and persist in sludge that may be applied to agricultural soil. Triclosan has been found in 3/4 of the U.S. population. In 2016, after 42 years of study, the FDA was finally able to stop the use of triclosan and other antimicrobials in hand soaps and body washes. However, triclosan is still added to a variety of building materials and consumer products, and other unnecessary antimicrobials are also being used, such as quaternary ammonium compounds, or quats, now found in many personal care products. Another example is nanosilver, added to a range of products where no benefits are proven. The safety of these antimicrobials has not been demonstrated. That's why we need the 6 classes approach, to stop replacing one hazardous chemical with another. So what can you do? Don't use products identified as antibacterial, antimicrobial, or anti-odor. Read ingredient labels. Avoid products containing triclosan and triclocarban. Look out for replacement antimicrobials. They are unnecessary and may also be problematic. When possible, ask for products without antimicrobials. At 6classes.org, you can learn more about antimicrobials and the other 5 classes, as well as view the entire video series. Brought to you by Green Science Policy Institute. Please share these videos for healthier products, people, and planet.
Okay, well, I just want to remind you, if you have questions, please submit them to ask@greensciencepolicy.org. And so I will once again ask our panel, what struck you as important, and is there any way that this impacts you? And Jen has something to say.
So the part I love about this video is that it looks at wastewater. I worked in wastewater for 7 years, and it's the place that nobody really wants to think about, but it's super important. Antimicrobials can have a big impact on what happens when things go to a wastewater treatment plant. They can kill the microbes there, and so from when I was working in pollution prevention, we worked really hard to get the hospitals that discharge to our treatment plant to stop using triclosan and triclocarban in the soaps they had at the hospital. And because the American Medical Association had already said you don't need anything but soap and water, regular soap and water, it was something that they were willing to do, which was great. But these antimicrobials show up and they do confer antibiotic resistance. They can cause a lot of harm to people. And I think this is, again, one of those places where we really need to ask whether they are necessary. We overuse them so much in our society.
Yeah, and I think that especially when the function is advertised as being antimicrobial or anti-odor, anti-odor, that's a red flag for me. I do know that many consumer products, if they contain water, are likely to need a preservative, and I would draw a distinction there that when they're making a claim about it being adding this added antimicrobial performance, it's usually completely unnecessary in surfaces, in clothing, in soaps. But then there are other chemicals that were used as preservatives that are usually less harmful, not as persistent and not as problematic in the wastewater that also deserve attention. But I think just to draw the distinction between this class, which really aren't necessary, and some of the preservatives, which may have necessary functions.
I guess I have a comment just linking to your comments now, just about how do you do a substitution? If soap and water is the thing to really replace most of the routine cleaning, that's all well and good. I had to do some routine blood tests a couple of weeks ago, and I came out of my blood test. It was early Saturday morning, and this pleasant woman came up to me and said, "Would I like a free donut?" And I said, "Well, of course." And so I went in, I got lured into this room where I was actually taking part of a survey, and it was about washing hands. And so she said, "Well, I want you to wash your hands just like you normally do." And so I did, and then she pulled out this black light and took me into this dark room. And of course, certain bacteria show up under UV light, right? So she showed my hands, and I go, "Oh, I didn't do such a good job." So, properly shamed and chastened, she said, "Okay, now I want you to wash your hands again." And I did, and got an A mark. But that's behavior change is one of the interventions, that you can do for substitution. It could be a material change, or it could be a process change, or it could be an application. But behavior change in very simple things like washing your hands better than you usually do could handle a lot of the substitution needs that we need for some of these things. So
So I want to add, because people, when they hear antimicrobials, they get worried about Purell and alcohol scrubs, and those are different. And just to say, I feel really lucky. About 20 years ago, when my daughter was young, a biochemistry professor here at Berkeley said, it's really good to have bacteria on your hands. They're protective, and don't use any of those liquid soaps that contain antimicrobials. And I had no idea they were harmful, but it made sense to me that bacteria were good to have on your hands. And he said, soap and water does a good job, and don't worry. That's one side of the picture. And now we've learned about all the potential for harm. And even, as it said in the video, even though for these chemicals to work, you actually have to wash your hands with them for 3 or 4 minutes, which nobody does. But they go down into the wash water, into the sewage sludge, and they are much more toxic, unfortunately, to the little creatures in the creeks and fish and invertebrates. So they're a big source of toxicity to our environment, and then they cycle back and end up, in our food and our breast milk, places we really don't want. So this is, I think, in some ways, one of the easier classes. You'd think it would be easy because there is not a real benefit for health purposes. I think if they're used for a preservative, that's a different question. So here, I'm going to pass some questions down. Let's see. Here, why don't we start with Marty, and I'll look for another good question.
Sure. This is a fun question, and it's called, the question is, are consumer products that eliminate any of these 6 classes generally more expensive for consumers? So this is a tricky question because often, doing something like pulling triclosan out of a hand soap, in fact, decreases the cost of producing that hand soap. But the other thing that comes along with branding around health and safety is that certain brands that choose to remove the use of 6 classes will then talk about how they're safer and then may charge a premium because they can get away with it in the marketplace. So there's not a simple answer to this question. Often removing a chemical will actually reduce cost. Substituting a chemical for something that has never been made before or changes do usually add cost because it takes money to change process or product, but those will come down over time. And then you have to calculate in on top of all of these things that often the chemical use in these 6 classes is relatively small, and so it doesn't drive the price in a big way. The price is often driven by the function or the brand itself. So I do believe that, especially long term, as people start demanding these things and it becomes mainstream, the cost of safer products will be on par or cheaper than potentially harmful products. But we're not there yet, and the first step is really education.
I wanted to add something about that, because I had said in the beginning that we have a material buyers club with big companies who want healthy workplaces. And so, for example, one of their goals is to have furniture that doesn't contain any highly fluorinated chemicals, antimicrobials, or flame retardants. And when they start out and they say, I don't want a chair without those chemicals, it costs more, even though the chemicals cost money. But the idea of this buyers club is if all these big companies with big purchasing abilities, Harvard University is a member, so they have huge purchasing ability, the city of San Francisco, if they all say together, we want chairs without these 3 chemicals, the price will come down. And we have a vision of really a universal buyers club where everybody asks for healthy products without the chemicals, and then the price would go way down. So I think that's where we can go, and our hope for these videos really is this will get the word out. So we're all asking for the same thing, and it becomes more affordable.
I just wanted to add to that a quick add, going into that supply chain, a little deeper in the supply chain, down a tier, where retailers are actually looking to their suppliers to supply a material for their products. That also is an issue because some of these retailers, like Levi's, for instance, they're getting supplies from suppliers who are servicing all sorts of different companies. And until those companies get together, and Marty might have more to say about this, but until those companies get together and demand from that particular supplier a material that meets that criteria, then it's very difficult for one company to, even a big company, to leverage the suppliers. I don't know if you had anything to add to that. But.
Yeah, no, it is true. It's why really sharing this information and sharing it not only with consumers, but with people within the supply chain is really important, because a lot of times it is about coordination, like Arlene said, so that you can change the supply chain, which is where a lot of this happens. And a lot of it happens outside the view of your typical consumer. And so it really is, these questions are not just for us as consumers, but they're questions for us as regulators, as business people. They're questions that can really drive change over the long term.
So the question I have here is, I'm a non-scientist. How do I interpret product labels to identify problem chemicals? So I'll say I'm not a chemist, and so this is a big challenge for many of us. And so I have a few go-to places. One of them is a tool that we created at San Francisco Department of the Environment called SF-Approved, sfapproved.org. And so if you're looking for cleaning products or furniture, you can go to that website and find both specifications if you're, say, a purchaser for an institution, or as a consumer. So we try to keep the information as up to date as we can. And so it's kind of a range of different products there. And then for cosmetics and personal care products, I go to skindeep.org or Environmental Working Group's website. They have a lot of great information. And there's probably other different labels, eco labels that you can look at. Maybe Marty, do you want to talk about any eco labels that you are familiar with?
A number of other eco labels, each of which has a stronghold in different places. So the EPA designed for the environment are now called Safer Choice, is really good for cleaning products. Cradle to Cradle is one that will look across a broader range, including textiles, some formulated goods, some other things. You have Green Screen, which is gaining popularity in even electronics or other places. EPEAT is another electronics label that's relatively important. So there's, within each sector, there are beginning to be labels, and so Tom brought it up earlier, third-party certification is a part of it. Also, just looking for resources like Jen mentioned is another way to do it. Good Guide is another resource like EWG that will go across product categories. There are a lot of third-party certifications out there. In itself can be a maze to navigate, but the important thing is finding the information that works for you as a consumer and starting small. Start with one class of chemicals. The videos here showed you what to look for on both the front of the package as well as the ingredient label. You find information on both sides. So start small and then move from there.
Okay, well, I'm going to quickly answer the last question, which is consumers trust manufacturers when they claim their products are free of these classes of chemicals. And unfortunately, manufacturers often don't know what's in their products. And so it's not really trusting them. They often give you their best answer. And so that's a place to start. It isn't always accurate because the supply chain is so complex and opaque, but it is a place to start. So I just want to conclude by reminding you that if you enjoyed these videos, be sure to share them with your friends and colleagues, and they're easy to find at sixclasses.org, and we would really appreciate knowing if they are useful to you or if you use them in their classrooms. If you tell us at sixclasses@greensciencepolicy.org. So I just wanted to thank our panelists and everybody at the Green Science Policy Institute who've worked so hard, and everyone else who made contributions, and especially to Jen, Marty, and Tom. And I wanted to invite you to join us again the next 2 Thursdays at 11. We will be looking again each time at 2 of the classes, having conversations, answering your questions. Next week, we will have Mark Leno, who really led the legislation that changed everything, so we no longer have literally pounds of harmful flame retardants in our furniture that can end up in our dust and our bodies and us. And Mark is now retired from the legislature, but running for the mayor of San Francisco. And we're also going to have Ken Cook, who is the executive director of the Environmental Working Group, who really started a lot of this work, a real visionary leader. And we'll have our own Avery Lindeman, who's the deputy director of the Green Science Policy, who has a deep knowledge of the chemistry. So we hope you will spread the word about next week's webcast. Also, as I said, share, even more important, the videos. You can watch all 7 of them now at sixclasses.org. So a big thanks to our panel, to everyone, and especially to those of you who have stayed the whole hour to hear the end. Thanks. Bye.